Some wartime decisions are remembered because they changed history. Others are nearly forgotten because they were made in desperation, hidden behind paperwork, shortages, and quiet compromise. Yet sometimes those overlooked decisions produce some of the rarest military firearms ever built. This rifle exists because an ally sacrificed its own priority for the greater war effort, forcing its engineers to search for an entirely different solution. The result was not a revolutionary new weapon, but a remarkable adaptation that quietly served long after the war it was created for had already ended. I'm Marcus Murphy, and you're watching Weapons Insight. Today, we're uncovering the fascinating story of one of Canada's rarest sniper rifles of the Second World War, a little-known variation of the Lee-Enfield No.4 Mk I that replaced Britain's standard optical sight with an American commercial scope. It is a story of wartime shortages, industrial ingenuity, international cooperation, and a rifle that nearly missed the conflict it was built to fight. By late 1943, the Second World War had entered one of its most demanding phases. Allied armies were expanding across multiple fronts, and the need for specialized equipment had never been greater. Among the most valuable tools on the battlefield were sniper rifles, capable of delivering precision fire far beyond the reach of ordinary infantry weapons. Canada had planned carefully, calculating that it needed hundreds of complete sniper rifle sets to equip its forces properly. The country's Long Branch arsenal, already producing the renowned No.4 sniper rifle, was expected to meet those requirements. Reality, however, had other plans. Although Canada had placed an order for 441 sniper rifle sets, only a small fraction arrived. British forces, facing far greater operational demands across Europe, urgently required the same equipment. Under mounting Allied pressure, Canada agreed to surrender the remainder of its allocation so British troops could receive the desperately needed rifles. It was a practical decision made in the interest of the broader war effort, but it left Canada's own military facing a significant shortage. Suddenly, hundreds of trained marksmen lacked the equipment they were supposed to carry into battle. Rather than waiting indefinitely for British production to catch up, Canadian officials searched for another answer. Their attention quickly turned south to the United States, where several commercial telescopic sights were already being manufactured in large numbers. These weren't military designs created specifically for combat, but they offered something even more valuable at that moment. They were available. Two optics immediately stood out as serious candidates. One was the Weaver 330, while the other was the Lyman Alaskan. Interestingly, these were the very same commercial scopes attracting the attention of the United States military, which was also evaluating practical solutions that could be adapted for wartime service. Canadian evaluators subjected both optics to testing, comparing durability, clarity, and overall suitability for military use. After careful examination, one model emerged as the clear favorite. The Lyman Alaskan earned Canada's confidence. Its rugged construction and dependable performance impressed evaluators, but one observation proved especially interesting. Reports suggested the Lyman Alaskan delivered superior performance in low-light conditions compared with Britain's standard No.32 sniper scope. In an era when dawn, dusk, and poor weather often determined the outcome of battlefield engagements, that advantage was impossible to ignore. By December 1943, Canadian military planners had decided exactly which optic they wanted. Approval, however, was only the beginning. Like so many wartime procurement projects, bureaucracy moved far slower than the battlefield. Months passed before the official order finally reached the Lyman Company in March 1944. Even then, there was uncertainty over how quickly production could satisfy the request. Fortunately, the wait proved shorter than expected. Just 2 months later, Lyman informed Canadian authorities that all 350 requested scopes were ready for delivery. The shipment arrived quickly, allowing Canadian industry to move to the next stage of the project. The task of adapting the rifle fell to Small Arms Limited, better known simply as SAL. Engineers had already been developing a unique mounting system while waiting for confirmation that the optics would actually arrive. Rather than copying Britain's established mounting arrangement, they designed an entirely different solution tailored specifically to the American scope. The finished design reflected both practicality and precision. Instead of the traditional British mounting arrangement used with the No.32 scope, SAL produced a robust single-piece base attached securely to the receiver. The Lyman optic itself could be removed using a pair of locking levers that secured it to a dovetail-style mount. The arrangement allowed the scope to be detached and reinstalled while maintaining a stable and repeatable fit, an impressive engineering solution that echoed similar mounting concepts appearing on contemporary American sniper rifles. The rifles themselves were assembled as a dedicated production batch, rather than mixed randomly into standard manufacturing. Every example received consecutive serial numbers, making this one of the most clearly identifiable sniper rifle contracts produced during the war. Matching serial numbers appeared on both the rifle and its scope mount, while each Lyman optic carried its own unique identification, reflecting the careful attention given to keeping every rifle and telescope together as a complete system. Although externally different, these rifles retained nearly all the proven characteristics that had already made the No.4 Mk I such a respected sniper platform. The familiar wooden cheek rest remained, providing a comfortable and consistent shooting position behind the centrally mounted optic. An additional sling swivel ahead of the magazine supported traditional sniper carry methods, while modifications to the iron sights ensured the scope had an unobstructed field of view. Every change served a practical purpose without fundamentally altering the rifle's trusted design. Ironically, despite the urgency that inspired the project, history moved faster than production. Assembly began during 1944, but manufacturing progressed more slowly than planners had hoped. Many rifles were completed only after the fighting in Europe was drawing to a close, and available evidence suggests that none reached operational units in time to participate in combat during the Second World War. For many military projects, that would have marked the end of the story. Instead, this rifle quietly found its place in a different chapter of military history. Following the war, Canada eventually acquired additional British No.32 scopes, reducing the importance of the trade pattern rifles. Yet rather than discarding them, the Canadian military retained these unusual sniper rifles in active service. When conflict erupted on the Korean Peninsula in 1950, these rifles finally had an opportunity to fulfill the role they had originally been built for. Their service did not end there. Throughout the early Cold War, they continued supporting NATO activities, including training exercises and military assistance programs. Some rifles were transferred to allied nations such as Belgium and the Netherlands, demonstrating how equipment originally created to solve a temporary wartime shortage continued contributing to collective defense years later. Eventually, however, military technology advanced once again, as NATO standardized around the new 7.62 by 51 mm cartridge. The aging .303 caliber Lee Enfield sniper rifles became obsolete. Canada's remaining examples were gradually withdrawn from service, while others were retired overseas. Some were dismantled and destroyed, disappearing forever, as governments cleared aging inventories to make room for newer equipment. Fortunately, not every rifle met that fate. A number survived through surplus sales in both Canada and the Netherlands, allowing collectors and historians to preserve these exceptionally rare firearms. Today, surviving examples are prized not because they fought famous battles or achieved legendary battlefield reputations, but because they tell an extraordinary story of adaptation under pressure. They represent a moment when military necessity outweighed tradition, when commercial innovation filled a critical wartime gap, and when Canadian engineers demonstrated remarkable flexibility in solving a problem that could easily have left their snipers without the tools they needed. Sometimes history celebrates the weapons that changed warfare forever. Other times, it is the rare rifles built in limited numbers, shaped by shortages rather than ambition, that reveal the true complexity of wartime decision-making. The Canadian No.4 Mk I trade pattern stands as one of those forgotten achievements, a quiet reminder that victory often depends not only on groundbreaking inventions, but also on the ability to adapt when circumstances refuse to cooperate. If you enjoyed discovering the remarkable history behind this rare Canadian sniper rifle, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear which overlooked military firearm you think deserves its own documentary. If you found this story informative, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Weapons Insight, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next journey into the hidden history of the world's most fascinating weapons.